Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, along with my partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. Aaron, we have a team. What do you think?
I like this team. I think it's going to be a good one. What do you think?
I agree. I saw them in person today. I watched them play football, and they were good at football. It was great.
Yeah, I am jealous that I wasn't able to make the practice with you. That bummed me out.
You had a pretty special day today. You had a pretty special day.
Yeah, my little guy started kindergarten today, so that was definitely a big day for us. Very happy about that. But the weather here in Western New York was absolutely perfect, and so that bummed me out that I missed being out at the Ralph. I'll call it the Ralph for the rest of my life. Being at the Ralph in a perfect weather day, and sort of it must have been a fun celebratory practice, knowing the 53's locked, and now we're on to regular football.
Yeah, so much less stress for the players. Such an easy approach to it. Got to hang out with Anthony Prohaska from Just Guys Coverage. That was a lot of fun, and got to see Kyle Trimble came and sat with us from Banged Up Bills. Sat with guys from the Cover One Slack channel, Mike L and GC came over and sat with us. It was a lot of fun. So it was great. We had a really good day, and I think you could see the energy from the team was kind of lighthearted. It was kind of a high tempo walkthrough kind of thing. They wasn't in full pads. They were just in shells. But it was still good. It was a lot of fun. Saw a lot of guys out there. We'll talk through a couple things later on. I'll mention as we get through the positions for the roster, who was dressed and wasn't, but a healthy team overall and a happy and excited team. So it was a great day, and it was a fun day to watch. It was beautiful, like 72 and overcast. It was perfect to watch. So much nicer than the weather we suffered through on Saturday for the game. But it was great. So being able to go out, and Nathan asking here, I drove 3 hours out and 3 hours back, 6 hours total to watch a 2 hour practice. So I have some mental health
crazy,
problems,
man, dude.
But and I did it twice in 4 days, 5 days. I did that for the game as well on Saturday. So
You're insane.
But those were, I did tell my wife, those were kind of like my last Bills trip. I don't really do a lot during the regular season because I like to watch it in my man cave downstairs. So, but let's kind of talk about as we go through the roster itself. We kind of started out. Oh, Lee, thank you, man. I really appreciate it. It's awesome to celebrate Aaron's little man's day. It was
Thank you very much,
day.
man.
We talked about it pre-show that there's not a lot of surprises or content to talk about with the 53-man roster. It was fairly predictable.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, outside of the Hollister being cut, and all of us in the entire Twitter thinking that, he's automatically just waiting to come back, and then you hear from Brandon Bean today that was just a straight up cut numbers wise. Outside of that, I mean, I guess you could nitpick, a Vernon Butler type thing, but outside of the Hollister, I didn't see any massive surprises that really were something that I was going to be mad at or sit here and debate with you tonight. It actually was a pretty smooth 53 that I think, you hit on it here before we started the show, that even with all the predictions that were out there, no one got it fully right, but I don't know that anything was shocking to anyone outside of Hollister.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We had talked that there wasn't as much fun in doing your 53 roster prediction because it was a very predictable roster in itself and the cuts that were there. And even with that, no one had Reed Ferguson being the, hey, go wait in the parking lot guy to be able to go through. And as we look at it, you start with the quarterbacks. There just wasn't a great deal of drama there. Maybe some people thought that they would consider a third quarterback, but I don't think it was ever really in play. So Josh and Trubisky were locked in there. We did get both Fromm and Webb back on the practice squad, which, whatever, it's fine. I guess it's developmental opportunities there still. So the fact that he wasn't claimed also kind of shows why Bean wasn't able to trade him for anything, because literally nobody even claimed him for free, let alone gave up a draft pick for him. Any surprises in the quarterback room? I mean, I think that was pretty spot on to what we expected.
Yeah, no surprises at all. And we have so much time to talk about the quarterback room that we don't have to spend a lot of time tonight. Yeah.
The running back room, again, pretty straightforward. But, we both kicked around. Could Tywan Jones be at risk? And we did see, we won't know. We'll talk about it when we get the defensive ends. Maybe without the trade, maybe that's the spot that gets pulled into question. But, Singletary, Zach Moss, Matt Breida, Taiwan Jones, and then I'm going to count Reggie Gilliam. But, Brandon Beane talked about in the presser that he plays multiple roles there. So we'll tie in the tight ends. That probably was the only surprise, that it was only Dawson Knox and Tommy Sweeney. We cut Jacob Hollister, and then Reggie Gilliam's kind of half in the room for the tight ends, half in the running back room as a fullback.
Yeah.
That was probably the biggest surprise for us.
Yeah. And so we talked about it a lot amongst all those position groups of something's got to give with the number of special teams aces that, we hear from Leslie Frazier, we hear from Brandon Beane, and they all speak highly of guys that play special teams. And every time we heard somebody get praised about their special teams on Twitter, it was automatically, well, then that guy's a lock. And they were able to make a trade and move one of those pieces. But if they weren't able to make that trade, I don't know how that shifts. I don't know that it's Taiwan Jones that's out, but something else would have had to give. I don't know that they would have changed what they were trying to do with this 53-man roster all that much. Brandon Beane spoke to that of, hey, do you keep 7 receivers or do you keep, 11 defensive linemen? And those are tough numbers to play. So luckily we didn't have to find out. I think that Taiwan Jones has an important role on this team. And, they talked about some of these guys as core special teamers, but you and Anthony and Sterling kind of all set me straight when he said the wording was really specific with Taiwan Jones and talking about him being elite at that position. So totally matters. And now Taiwan's on the team. And I really like this running back room, though, especially after the game we sat and watched, because I was worried about Breida a little bit in terms of trying to use him as a traditional running back. Didn't work. I was really frustrated after that second preseason game, seeing a lot of the spiller bouncing it out, not a lot of vision. Didn't like what I was seeing. He had one nice screen in that game, and you saw hey, if you can get this guy into space and get him the ball, then now that speed shows up. And then we saw how they were able to use him in that last game, in that final game, and some of the jet sweep stuff, getting him out in bubble screen stuff. If Dable can even get him 4 or 5 looks a game where he gets him the ball in space and he breaks off my favorite thing in the world, the toxic differential play, that's worth this roster spot all day long. So I like this room. I'm really excited. I don't think a lot of people were talking about how good Devin Singletary looked in those first couple games, and he did. Zach Moss actually looks really good, but we're not talking about it because a couple of those runs got taken back. But he's getting around on the edge, on the outside. He's showing off some speed. He's running tough. This is going to be a nice combination, and I think an efficient combination, which is what we've been pounding the table for this whole offseason.
100%. And the 2 best runs of the game didn't count on Saturday, and both were Zach Moss. I will say today, Matt Breida had those same schemed up plays ready for him. There was more jet motion. There was more screens. I currently think he's going to be a game day active and part of this roster, and that's one of the bonuses when you kind of consolidate. Last year, Isaiah McKenzie and Andre Roberts were 2 roster spots. Now McKenzie can make that 1, being the returner and part of the receiving group. So that might give a free spot for the game day active for Matt Breida. That'll be interesting to look at. But I was pleased with that. And no surprises there. Reggie Gilliam brings more to the table as an extra tight end, as a fullback, short yardage specialist, special teams. Really shows that versatility and the more you can do really is a thing to be able to look at. The receivers, not a ton of surprises there. Obviously, we knew Diggs, Sanders, Beasley, Davis were all absolute locks. Isaiah McKenzie showed as he went that he was a lock. Maybe some speculation he would have a short-term IR stint. Kumaro basically earned himself into a lock by the end of it. He was just constantly flashing, plus a special teams contributor. Maybe some question on Marquez Stevenson. So obviously, Marquez Stevenson is there for a day and then put on IR. We talked about it. The one move nobody had was Reed Ferguson being the, hey, could you wait in the parking lot guy? I've actually just been told by very reliable sources that Reed Ferguson was given back his 4-year contract that he had beforehand. So really glad to see that the team handled that the way that he did. He is as reliable as you can ask for as a long snapper. We never have to worry about that. So good on him to get his 4-year deal back. And actually, I think even got a little bit from the signing bonus there and then got another deal today. So probably actually benefited financially from this. So, good on him to be able to help the team out like that and be a good sport about how they handled it. But I thought the receiver room was, the way I would like to have seen it. And you add into that, we were able to get Isaiah Hodgins back on the practice squad. So certainly a benefit there as well. I thought it was an overall positive.
Yeah, I think the room shaked out in a way that we talked about on the prediction podcast. And a guy like Kumro, it puts you in a tough spot because like only 27 undrafted or guys that were waived got claimed. But if he made it to the waiver wire that the Packers were going to bring him back just to
100%.
make Aaron Rodgers happy in that regard. So a guy you couldn't really get rid of anyway. And he is going to be, I think, what you lost in a one special teams guy, I think he'll have a year on special teams where he's a main contributor to the special teams. So I like this room. I think it's a well-rounded room. And yeah, I was happy to get Hodgins back. I wasn't really concerned necessarily about him not coming back, especially because he had such a silent offseason again this year, and this kind of injuries popped up again for him. So still in development. That's good though, to have that funnel of development behind some of the veterans that you have right now at the wide receiver position, because this room, I like it today. I like it in 2021, but this could be a room. Emmanuel Sanders is a hired gun. He's only here
34.
probably, for this year. I don't know what Cole Beasley's future is like. I don't know when that wall hits him. I'm not worried about Stephon Diggs, but you need to keep funneling talent into this room and young talent. So it's good to get some of those guys back on the practice squad, because that's really what that spot's all about. So I'm excited about this room going forward.
Absolutely. And another one, good on Tanner Gentry to earn a practice squad spot.
Yeah.
Little hat tip to Josh Allen as well, and one of his favorites from college. Also, we talked about the tight ends. Quentin Morris was brought back on the practice squad, a guy who showed maybe some, Reggie Gilliam light type versatility, being able to move around some different spots.
Yep.
The offensive line, again, no surprises, although I'll mention one afterwards. But, obviously Dawkins, Feliciano, Morris, Ford, Darrell Williams, Ryan Bates, Ike Bacher, Spencer Brown, and Tommy Doyle. Some people wondered the health of Tommy Doyle. Would he go on IR ahead of time where you lose him for the whole year? Would you bring him on and then go to short-term IR? We actually saw neither. So right now, obviously, he's the easiest, and Egriff chiming in here, healthy scratch. He's the easiest of any of the guys we've listed so far when you're looking for who are going to be the game day inactives. But a little surprised that he wasn't moved there to open up a spot to bring back someone like Hollister or whatever it may be. But also it's great that he's healthy and that's not a concern. Same thing, I saw Spencer Brown moving around today, moved around really well. We talked about the receivers in the last one. Same thing for Isaiah McKenzie, moved around really well, did not look to be a major concern. That was certainly a positive as well. But as we got towards the end of camp, I don't think there was a lot of opportunity for any surprises in the offensive line room. Although maybe one of the names that came up back on the practice squad, we got both Jack Anderson and Jameel Douglas, which were probably my top two choices of any of the depth guys.
Yeah, no real surprises. I didn't have Tommy Doyle making my 53 just because of I did have Darryl Johnson making it. And so numbers wise, he was kind of at that bottom cutoff of the roster for me. But I think it goes to show you, and this is something we talked about when we talked about the offensive line and backup offensive line, is league wide. At some point, it's just about bodies, right? And if you can have a young body to develop, I didn't see a lot out of Doyle that I loved. I thought he got better as the preseason went on, which was fun. And then he got hurt. So I'm excited that he's in this building and you have a young tackle that you can kind of mold and develop. I agree. He's going to be a healthy scratch. If they need to throw him on the IR for a move here coming up this week, he's probably the candidate that's at the bottom of that spot in the roster where they could do that. But good for him for making the roster. But I think it goes to show you that backup line is very limited in this league, and they'll keep as many bodies as they can to have on that active roster just in case of emergency that he needs to be able to be pulled up and play.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about that here at the end. That's going to be one of my predictions for one of the last open spots here, is that I think we could see something else. But moving into defensive line, again, this one sorted itself out on Monday because we saw the trade of Darryl Johnson. So we saw the reverse of the Carolina connection as Dan Morgan went down there. Obviously a guy trying to add some valuable depth to the Carolina defensive line rotation. Already have some young guys like Brian Burns, and now add a guy who can rotate in and play special teams. So Daryl Johnson goes to Carolina for a 6th-round pick. A lot of people were upset, with some of the other names. I don't know that anyone made the roster here that I'm pounding the table should have got cut for Daryl Johnson. So a lot of it was probably, hey, we can get a 6th-round pick for Daryl Johnson, and we can't for any of these other guys, and he's just not that much better than any of the rest of them. So
Right.
I think he would have been in that discussion, and I think he was the most logical move. And they honestly probably did choose F.A. Obata over him. I have a feeling Obata could have got a similar return from a draft standpoint, but maybe not. Johnson's younger, plays special teams. There's some versatility there. But overall, again, Jerry Hughes, Gregory Rousseau, F.A. Obata, Mario Addison, A.J. Epinesa, Boogie Basham, 6 defensive ends. We thought 7 would be a stretch. But again, it's a great problem to have, the fact that we had to fit 6 anyways.
Right.
Daryl Johnson's trade, another trade element, Lee Smith officially made the 53-man roster for the Atlanta Falcons, so the 7th-round pick we got for him does convey. So we now have an extra 6 and an extra 7th-round pick just as a little bonus heading into next year.
Yeah, and those bonuses are great. Joe Marino, Locked On Bills podcast, which I'm sure you all already listened to. I don't have to tell you to go listen to him. But he brought up a great point that the way this roster and the depth of this roster is, it's going to be really hard for the Buffalo Bills to convince undrafted free agents to come here going forward. And so stockpiling those late picks is essentially filling in where you would have had some of those undrafted guys and maybe being able to take more risks on guys that you don't want to hit that undrafted free agent market in the 7th round, and just getting them in your building and sort of jumping the line, if you will, to get those guys in, because teams are going to look at this bill, or agents are going to look at this Bills roster and see, we'll talk about it in the cornerbacks, but a Nick McLeod isn't able to make this team and ends up getting claimed somewhere else. And that's going to be more and more a thing as they build up the depth of this roster. So good on Bean for stockpiling those late round picks. And also, if you're not pulling that, those are picks that you can bulk up together to move around in the draft, which he also likes to have those assets. But I do think the Daryl Johnson trade was a fine trade. I think it helped shape this 53-man roster exactly where he needed it to be. I think people maybe overreacted to it a little bit on Twitter in terms of, we saw some splash out of him this summer. I liked what I saw out of him this summer, but let's not lie to ourselves about who he was up until we saw this summer. He really showed below
Special
average
teams
defense.
only.
Yeah, below average, well below average defensive end play. And even this summer, he showed some below average run defense play. So he was more of a pass rush specialist. And the way that this rotation is, he really wasn't going to get the reps even on game day. And you would have to have him in as a special teams guy, but he wouldn't really contribute to the defensive end room anyway. I know people are down on Mario Addison, but I'll tell you right now, he might end up being the Trent Murphy of the 2021 Bills in terms of, I could see him being a guy. I talked with Pat Moran on his podcast this week. I could see Mario Addison being game day inactive as the season goes on, and Carlos Basham taking on more of a role as the season goes on. That wouldn't surprise me all that much. But his leadership, his ability to help those guys along the way is something that won't show up in stats. It's not going to be on PFF, but it matters to Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane. I don't even think that he was being considered for trade all that much, and teams weren't looking to take on a contract and an older player. So he's a hard piece to move. So I get, you want to keep the younger guy, the guy that's showing some potential versus a guy who you may think is declining, but Mario Addison is an important part of this locker room, and that's not going to show up on the field, and it's hard to quantify, but it matters to the McBean front office, and it matters a lot.
Absolutely. And I think that, it's something where I actually just did this in DMs with Anthony Marino over in the group from Buffalo Rumblings. I do think that Mario Addison's snap count comes down, but I think it comes down from 620 down to like 500 or 450 or 400. I don't think that he's going to just fade into the background. And I actually think he's going to do better on a limited snap count to be able to go in there. I still think he's going to be a top-end contributor and play a similar snap count to Rousseau and Epinesa. And, we'll see if as the season goes, I could see Rousseau taking on more and more of those. I could see Epinesa taking on more and more of those. And then if you see Basham really stepping into his own, maybe we do see a handoff later in the year. But I still think Addison's going to be a piece of this rotation and one that matters. And today, when Jerry Hughes had his rest day, Mario Addison was the other starter, not AJ Epinesa, not Carlos Basham. Like, he's still definitely a part of their plan. So we'll see where that goes to. But I think that it was great to get an asset that we could. I don't think that there's people tried to throw out the Wyatt Teller situation. I don't think that's at risk here. I don't think that they had 2 full seasons, a third offseason, training camp, preseason games, and didn't know what they were doing when they traded a player like that for a 6th-round pick. I just don't think that's the risk of what we have here.
And if it is, I'm really going to be happy for Ben Johnson if he turns into one of the best players at his position. Fantastic, good for you. I think the Bills' defensive room is going to be really good this year, and you probably won't miss him all that much. And if he turns into some mega player, fantastic, good for him.
Yeah. From a defensive tackle standpoint, we saw Star Lotulelei, Ed Oliver, Vernon Butler, Justin Zimmer, and Harrison Phillips. One of the biggest surprises here was, appreciate you, John. You're always awesome here in the chat. We really appreciate you. No one moved to short-term IR. So getting into a situation where we are having 5 defensive tackles make the roster, that means we're still at 11 defensive linemen. We were joking before that, man, there's no way we can do 7 defensive ends and that, who are we going to have to get rid of? We ended up trading Daryl Johnson, but also having a 5th defensive tackle, and then they all stayed on the active roster. No short-term IR. I will tell you today at practice, Harrison Phillips looked good. He looked healthy and explosive. Full sprints across the field from drill to drill, the first guy in line for every drill, exploding out of his stance into the sled. He was giving 100% effort today. It was very noticeable. And Anthony Prohaska even made the comment that it almost seemed like he was trying to prove it to himself as much as he was trying to prove it to coaches or trainers or anything. He was trying to reassure and convince himself that he was back. But he looked good, and he looked explosive, and he looked strong, wearing a knee brace, but moving around well. Vernon Butler actually moved around pretty well and was noticeable to a couple of us. Be like, oh, it was, he looked solid and was moving really well. So a little mild surprise there that I say a surprise that a day after the IR moves, I didn't expect there to be 5 defensive tackles.
Yeah, I thought they would go light, right? Like I think a lot of people thought
could they do 3?
Yeah, I think everyone was kind of talking maybe they'll go light here. They did not, and I think that's a good thing. And I also, to the injury news, it sounds like we saw a lot of red jerseys today, but a lot of the red jerseys were still going and playing forward. And Brandon Beane sort of alluded to, that as practice ramps up next week, they're going to go away here and come back and ramp up into a game week practice. Yeah. And as that ramps up, he was expecting a lot of these guys who we've been worried about. And this is, as content creators, I'm torn because I don't want Sean McDermott to give up any injury information, but at the same time, when you're dealing with, rosters and, a lot of that roster gymnastics and manipulation of, are they going to put guys on IR? You want to know a little bit more significant about these injuries. Is the injury to Taron Johnson something where he has to go on short-term IR or not? We found out today that I think a lot of these injuries, these guys are going to be ready to go for the season. They might be dinged up a little bit, but everyone looks like they're going to be heading healthy going into the season. So the Bills' biggest weakness, in my opinion, was defensive line and interior offensive line. I don't know that they addressed interior offensive line, and hopefully Cody Ford makes the step where he didn't need to address it from the outside.
Yeah, hopefully him being healthy is addressing it.
Yes, exactly. But at the defensive line, I think getting back a Harrison Phillips healthy, adding a Star Lotulelei healthy, those things are going to help them win at the line of scrimmage. And so a heavy rotation, Brandon Beane has talked about it since he arrived here. Every time they bring in more defensive ends, people say, well, how many do you need? And he's like, if I could have 12 of these guys, I would do it. Their goal is to have a healthy rotation of defensive linemen. And some of these guys are going to be game day actives while they continue to develop. I think Boogie Basham probably won't see a whole lot of run in the first handful of games, maybe a couple months of the season. And that's an okay problem to have, that you have good high draft value talent that you can't even get on the field because you have so much talent in that rotation.
Yeah, someone asked me today to predict the 5 game day inactives, and I did predict for game one that it would be Carlos Basham.
Yeah.
Ryan here asking, does Phillips push Star for more playing time? Check out the feed on the Cover One Twitter handle. Eric did a nice breakdown of a couple snaps that Star had, really showing his value. He had a hump move down on the goal line for the 4th down play that he just threw the guard out of the way and then helped make the stop. Had a couple others where he really stood his ground and takes 2 steps into the backfield and then takes on a double team and holds it there.
A really nice play where Rousseau gets the hit, and everybody
Yes.
talks about Rousseau getting the hit, but the disruption was really caused by Star Latuile, and he looked quick and he came around. Yeah, I think he's going to have a lot bigger role than people think.
Yeah, so now I will say Phillips also looked good, and I think that there's a chance that they can keep each other relatively fresh and healthy, and neither of them have had always the most dependable availability. So that's certainly something to watch for to be able to have as an option. I don't know that I see Phillips pushing Star to the bench, but maybe he does carve out a 50-50 split in some of those reps, and I think that would be great to be able to deal with. A small surprise for me was the linebacker room. I know we had debated that might be the area they could cut thin, especially if they went to 11 defensive linemen. So obviously, I don't think many of us predicted the 2 tight ends. That was where they ended up going thin. And then we'll talk about another here in a moment. But having, Milano and Edmonds, Klein, Matakevich were all locks. Andre Smith was similar to Kumaro, where as it went along, he started to really become firmer and firmer, that he wasn't really in question. Terrell Dotson was a guy that I struggled with, and the way that I framed it on the show, on the roundtable show with you guys last week, was I liked him in a vacuum better than the other options, but I wasn't sure, was his 6th linebacker spot more valuable than a 5th safety or a 6th cornerback. And I just felt like if they were going to make that choice, I kind of thought that's where they were going to lean, is they were going to rather have the extra DB and go short at linebacker. I'm not upset, because I do think Terrell Dotson's a better linebacker than, say, Nick McLeod is a cornerback. I think that's, he's better at linebacker than McLeod is at corner, but I was a little surprised that they went with 6. So I was glad they kept a good player and a young player that's developing. And when we probably will be without AJ Klein next year, I like the idea of maybe not needing to spend a lot of money and having Terrell Dotson and Andre Smith as the backup linebackers. And it looked like Matakevich looked a little more presentable as a backup linebacker in the reps we saw. But that was one that I didn't predict. I did think we would end up with 5 linebackers, and thought Dotson was a pleasant surprise, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree in the term pleasant surprise. I struggled with whether or not Dotson would be able to get on here. And there, in looking at the 53, I talked myself in and out of ways to get him on. The problem with this room is there's a lot of unknowns, I think, past 2021, and you want to keep some of the youth behind. I think Andre Smith's a lot younger than people realize he is. 24. He's still a developmental prospect at that linebacker position. He talked about that after one of the games, of hoping to continue to develop where he can be a starting linebacker in the NFL someday. So I think he knows where he is in his development, and that's good. Klein is not a part of the future of any NFL team right now, and I like it. I like how his second half of the season went, but I don't know that he's going to be able to, if needed in a spot, if he's going to come in and be the guy he was at the start of 2020, or if he's going to be able to pick up where he left off in 2021. So to have something behind him. Tremaine Edmonds struggled to stay on the field last year. Matt Milano struggled to stay on the field consistently. I think the injuries are a little overblown, and that I'm not going to put an injury prone label on him yet, but I would still be nervous that he's going to be able to make it through a full season. So to have a little bit of extra depth there and guys that can contribute on special teams is a benefit to this team. They found out last year that room shrinks real quick, and they were pulling guys off the street to try to get anybody that could be reasonable to play that position. So I think what happened last year probably went into padding that room a little bit this year, and having 2 guys that are developmental prospects in Andre Smith and Dotson, just in case you might not be able to keep Tremaine Edmonds going forward. If he has a monster breakout season, numbers get real iffy. Numbers get kind of real iffy either way.
Yeah, that Darius Leonard and Fred Warner contract, it scared the crap out of me. It would be a great problem to deal with if we have an all-pro level season. I can't wait to argue
about that.
Yes, if we have an all-pro level season where we can't afford Tremaine Edmonds, that means we had a hell of a season.
Yes.
But yes, it is in play.
Yeah.
And I actually didn't mind that on the practice squad we snagged Joe Gillies Harris. I thought that he was a player that, if you gave me my choice there, I had Dotson ahead of him, but I wouldn't mind holding on to him. He had some flashes there. So he was a guy that you wondered, would he want to try for a clearer path to a roster on another team. So I was happy to get him back. I also didn't mention we got Mike Love back at the defensive end group and Brandon Bryant back at the defensive tackle group. Also guys we're familiar with and we're fans of.
And guys that if things get real bad and you need to pull up, like I don't mind pulling up, getting names like that, and they're playable guys. Yep.
Yeah. Moving into the secondary here, this was the area that I thought they were going to try to find something, and Brandon Beane talked about it in his presser. I think he wanted to. We had Tre'Davious White, Levi Wallace, Taron Johnson, Dane Jackson, Saran Neal. Those 5 were never in question. We knew those 5 were making the team. It was always, is there going to be a 6th? So we did see on the practice squad, we were able to get back Elijah Griffin, Cam Lewis, and Rashad Wildgoose. Really happy about those, especially Cam Lewis and Rashad Wildgoose. Those were the guys that I was debating making the team. I know there was some question. Cincinnati claimed Nick McLeod, and as you referenced earlier in the show, only 27 players in the entire NFL were claimed. Out of 1,800 that were released in the last day, 27 were claimed. It's not all that many, similar to the Bills having Vincent Taylor claimed last year. So everyone always freaks out, oh my gosh, we're going to have all of our guys claimed.
We're not going to keep anyone. Yeah.
We had lots of years where we didn't have anyone claimed. In the last 2 years, we've had one guy each year. I'm happy for Nick McLeod. He had some flashes in the first 2 games. He had some struggles in some of the other games or in some of the other moments, but I would have been happy to get him back on the practice squad. I never considered him for an active roster spot. I was considering Wildgoose and Cam Lewis. I had him next. So, I guess I had him as our 8th best cornerback. But I would have been happy to get him on the practice squad instead of Elijah Griffin. I would have had him in that spot ahead of him. But I don't know that. I had a couple of people today frustrated. Oh, see, we don't invest in the cornerback room. And why can't we keep a guy like that? And I said, those are separate things. Now, do I wish that we had spent an earlier pick on a cornerback in the draft? Sure. Does Nick McLeod getting claimed by Cincinnati have anything to do with that? No. He wasn't a guy that was going to impact our roster. So I'm happy with the 5 we kept. I wouldn't mind keeping our eyes open if somebody came available to be another veteran available there. That's probably the depth spot, one of the 2 I'm the most nervous about. Sure. But the 5 that made it were pretty obvious.
Yeah, and the 5 that made it, and then you didn't see anybody get kicked over to IR yet with that group. Because my real concern right now with that group was Levi Wallace missing a handful of practices, and nobody really knew what's going on with him.
He looked totally normal today and had a regular color jersey on.
Yeah, and then Dane Jackson, I know, had a red jersey on, but he was missing practices. And last we heard was he had an MRI, and nobody heard anything else from that. So not knowing where that depth was going to be.
Taron Johnson's club, I showed some photo evidence of today.
Yeah, which just might make him more dangerous running around with the club on. So, but I love Saran Neal, but I don't want him to be the backup boundary. So knowing that Dane Jackson, I think, is going to be trending in the right direction to stay as the backup boundary, it makes me happy. I agree with you. I think that they're going to be scouring vets, looking at this position. I won't be shocked if they bring some guys in for tryouts, and you see a lot of cornerbacks kind of rotating through the bottom of that roster. I still like Wildgoose as a developmental guy and possibly a pull-up guy. I thought I saw quite a bit of people feeling that Cam Lewis was somehow going to be somebody that was stolen. And I like Cam Lewis. I like the story that he's a UB guy, but he's a Jag. He's just another
2 times last year too.
Yeah. A depth practice squad, maybe not practice squad corner. Maybe you can pull him up and he can be serviceable for a handful of games, but there was nothing there that I wouldn't have lost sleep if somebody claimed Cam Lewis.
This is now the 3rd time that he's passed through waivers without being
and it's nothing against the player. I'm not trying to trash on him, just like where he is in his development doesn't scare me. But I like this group. I like it probably better than most people. I'm a fan of Levi Wallace at cornerback too. I like the drop off from Levi to Dane. I'm still high on Dane as a prospect, and for him, Brandon Beane specifically said as a former 7th round pick to now turn around and make a pretty good roster here. I think everybody thinks this Bills roster is pretty good front to back, is a testament to him. But yeah, I don't think they're done trying to find ways to add to this room. But I don't know that they also want to remove anyone. He talked about what Sarah Neal means to Leslie Frazier. It sounded like, from what Brandon Beane said, really pounded the table for Sarah Neal to make this roster, and that maybe he hasn't totally found his spot yet on the field, but he's one of the best tacklers on this team, and that he can be a emergency backup safety. He can play inside and outside. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife. He referred to him sort of as the Reggie Gilliam of the defense with that type of versatility. And they talk about that mattering all the time. So I don't know that they want to push anyone off from their 53 that they have on there now, but I would expect that they try to find ways to add if it comes available.
Yeah, and a couple good questions here. I got into with a couple guys in Twitter today. I always know what we should have done after I see what happened. So,
every time.
Yeah, of course, in hindsight, can I put together a combination where we knew that Groot was going to be the one that exploded and not Basham, and that we could keep Daryl Johnson and take a cornerback instead of Basham? Well, sure. In hindsight, yeah, of course we would. Well, what if Basham was the guy who exploded and is getting all the rave reviews and everything like that instead of Groot? Like, we didn't know that at the time. And it's, and then on top of that, if we had the second round pick cornerback as a sixth cornerback, I don't think we're cutting Dane Jackson or Saran Neal, so there might not be room for Daryl Johnson either. So it's of course, there's always different combinations of things I'd love to put together and find a way to invest in some other positions that I value. But, I think sometimes that's easier in hindsight than in reality.
Yeah, and Basham also, I think he's getting a lot of flack on the internet because of that pro-ready label that we've talked so much about. And I think it's unfair to him. I think he got better as the preseason went on, and he didn't get the flashy plays that Rousseau got. He didn't get the QB hits and stuff like that, but he did his job, and he showed the versatility of being able to play inside and outside, which is something Brandon Beane really likes. And again, when you're GM and you're building a team, you have to think beyond this. And Jerry Hughes is aging out of his position. Mario Addison is clearly aging out of his position. Neither one of those guys are long-term guys at that position for the Bills. The long term is AJ Epinesa, Greg Rousseau, and Boogie Basham. That's the future of that position. So to go a little heavy on it this year, that's okay. Cornerback is going to be deep in every single draft class for the rest of history. Wide receiver, cornerback, you're going to have tons of high-end talent at these positions. I wouldn't be shocked if Brandon Beane double dips at corner next year. I know people are frustrated that he hasn't done it yet, but he will address it. And let's not forget, the Bills maintained a floor of a very good defense at the defensive backfield. So they didn't address it in the way people wanted to, but they didn't get any worse. They maintained a floor, and they're still going to put a very good defensive backfield out on the field. And
every defensive backfield looks better with a better pass rush.
Yes.
So I know this is a name you've thrown around there in Chris's question.
Yeah.
Obviously, huge asterisk of, pending some of the maybe mental health, maybe emotional stability questions we saw in that video. I will say, prior to that, a guy that was pretty genuinely surprising to see in that moment was a pretty well-respected guy around NFL locker rooms. And prior to that moment was a guy that you and I were both kind of pounding the table for. Do you think there's a chance, or do you think that's probably a pipe dream?
It's a tough one because we haven't heard anything about it since, and you haven't seen any interest in him. I think this might be one of those things. So what I do know about the NFL is if you have enough talent, they'll get over just about anything, and talent ends up winning out. This might be a similar situation to some other guys we've seen, a Ray Rice, for instance. I think if Ray Rice was a better running back when that horrible incident went down, I think a lot of teams would have gotten over it and continued to have him on their roster.
Like Kareem Hunt or Tyreek Hill.
Hunt. Yeah, it happens all the time. Yeah, Adrian Peterson broke his kid's arm and continued to play football after his suspension. So I think if the talent's there, people will grab you up. I think Sherman's probably on the wrong side of his career to take a loss like that. But if there's a team that can handle it's the Buffalo Bills. I think he's a fit. He's not going to answer what people want, which is more athleticism at the cornerback position, but I think he could be a veteran. Say somebody gets hurt or there's an injury out there. I think it's a name to keep an eye on. The Bills would do their due diligence to see that he was okay. But yeah, that I hope whatever help he needs, he gets. And if he's ready to play, I would still be more than happy to bring him into the fold.
The final position group here is the safety group. And again, not a lot of surprises, but maybe a little question there at the end. Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, Damar Hamlin, Jaquan Johnson. I think that slowly, similar to our comments with Andre Smith and Jake Kumaro, Damar Hamlin made it pretty clear he had locked up that spot once we got into that third game in the last practices that we saw. So I think that was a pretty easy one. I was kind of pounding the table for Josh Thomas, that just a guy that I could see Heath Farwell and Sean McDermott pounding the table for. He earned it in a lot of reps. So one, I'm really glad to see that the Bills got him back on practice squad. He's a guy that I like, but is still a UDFA and did make a roster for a reason. It didn't get claimed for a reason. So he's one of those guys that's easy to fall for because of the effort plays and the way he flies around the field. But you know, Damar Hamlin has the much brighter future as far as the backup safeties go.
Yeah, and I like this safety room. I'm not crazy about Jaquan Johnson like a lot of folks are, but I think that he's a nice young piece on special teams, and I think he can sort of fill that Dean Marlowe role. I think both he and Hamlin can fill what we got out of Dean Marlowe. I know Clayton here asks, is Dean Marlowe coming back? And I know you and I sort of went back and forth on Marlowe a little bit on Twitter, and I'm not opposed to Marlowe coming back at all. I like him. He's a good rosterable player, but I don't know that there's a significant gain or drop off either way between a Damar Hamlin and a Dean Marlowe. And I think you kind of go with the youth and your own development of keeping some young guys, because again, this is another position. I don't know, are they going to be able to pay Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde both the money they want long-term? Are you going to be able to keep both of these guys in-house long-term? It's a position for the last couple of years I've been talking about they need to address and find a guy to develop, or not for 2022 or anything like that, but here in the next 3 to 4 years, you have to sort of have that guy in the building that you're ready to replace one of the guys with. I don't know if you're going to be able to keep both of them or lose both of them, but you're going to have to replace one of them at some point. And so I'm big on Hamlin. My arrow's way up on Damar Hamlin. I'm ready. I'm accepting applications to the Damar Hamlin fan club. So anyone that wants in, I really like this guy a lot. And so I'm happy about this safety position. And yeah, getting Thomas back on the practice squad, I think only increases my kind of excitement for the future at the safety and the development that we're going to get to see at that position.
Yeah. And it's, you know, I'll say my approach and momentary excitement about Dean Marlowe getting released by the Lions is probably some emotional hedging and some insurance of
sure.
I'm not 100% in what we have with Jaquan Johnson or Dean Marlowe or Josh Tom or I'm sorry, Dean Marlowe or for for Damar Hamlin or for Josh Thomas, and I know what we have in Dean Marlowe. I at least know what we get. I know we have a base level replacement level safety who can play some nickel and is versatile and can contribute, and I think that we have higher upside than that in maybe 2 out of those 3 guys with Johnson and with, I think Johnson is destined for a pretty similar tier level as Dean Marlowe. And I think that Damar Hamlin has a higher upside than that to be able to do more than that. But yeah, you have multiple applications in the chat here.
I like it.
So it's something where I think it just makes me feel a little bit better. And I almost am seeing Marlowe helping my anxiety with the nickel and cornerback depth as much as a 5th safety, just because he was able to kind of do both. And he was a really valuable piece on game day because you could move him into any of those spots. So we'll see where it goes. And maybe Leslie Frazier pounding the table for Saran Neal should be all the trust I need to be able to go through and do it. So we'll see where that goes. But
and you had brought up that maybe Marlowe is a Reed Ferguson for the Lions, where they cut him and then they're going to bring him back to in some way or another. And if they don't, I don't know. I think he might be a guy that kind of floats around for a week or two here and is just sitting there waiting for a job. I don't know that teams are chomping at the bit to get Dean Marlowe in their building necessarily. I think he could be around for a little while, where if something happens and the Bills need an extra guy, that he could come in. Say Jaquan's injury is maybe a little bit lingering more than they thought it was, and they can throw Jaquan Johnson on the short-term IR and bring a Dean Marlowe. And I think that's a very real scenario where if something happens, they want guys that know this defense and who out there better that knows their defense. So if he's available, I could see it, but I'm not worried about either way. I really like this backup safety situation they have.
Absolutely. And I think that's the smart way to look at it. And that, overall, we went through it position by position, but here's the full practice squad of who they brought back: Jake Fromm and Davis Webb, Jack Anderson, Jameel Douglas, Antonio Williams, glad to see him back as well, Isaiah Hodgins, Tanner Gentry, Quentin Morris, Joe Gillies-Harris, Mike Love, Brandon Bryant, Josh Thomas, Elijah Griffin, Cam Lewis, Rashad Wildgoose, and then there's an empty spot. Mm-hmm. And there's one spot where I don't know what that's going to be, and I'm going to let my reckless speculation bring us back to our friends that we're excited about a whole nother season together with here, and it'll be our Uncle Jumbo's player spotlight. That instead of having a player to spotlight, it's a spot to spotlight here, where Brandon Beane made comments in the presser that the 16th practice squad spot is a guy who was not available today because he was traveling. So if a player was traveling, that means he wasn't in camp with the Bills. It means it's somebody from another spot. It also means it was not a waiver claim, and it's a veteran player. Right. So it's a vested veteran who's been in the league more than 4 years. It's someone who is on another roster, needs to come in, and whether that's for a, physical to confirm health and things like that, or simply to talk to them before they're able to go through everything. I thought it was interesting. We haven't seen any reporting on it. So allow me to recklessly speculate. John Brown got released by the Raiders. Dean Marlowe got released by the Lions. Terrell Crosby is an offensive tackle that got released by the Lions with an injury designation. And Jimmy Moreland is a nickel corner that got released and not claimed by the Washington football team. Some of those names, the reason you wouldn't claim them is because you would want to bring them in for a physical and be able to see Terrell Crosby and Jimmy Moreland both had an injury settlement in their release, which means it would make sense that you'd want to physically get them in the building to do an MRI and a full physical and a checkout before you were to do anything. Those are some of the names that pop for me that I could see making sense. Jimmy Moreland was a nickel corner, played some solid football for Washington last year. Terrell Crosby was a starting tackle, make me feel a little bit better, just as we're waiting for Spencer Brown and Tommy Doyle to develop. And then obviously we know, John Brown and Dean Marlowe, I'm sure all four of them would prefer a roster spot and would prefer a roster that wasn't as deep and had a clear path to playing time. But at some point, every player is going to have to work down their priority list, and at some point, a practice squad on a really good roster is better than nothing.
I'm having a wicked hard time paying attention because it looks like the Uncle Jumbo's Country Lemon is your microphone, and you were just speaking directly into it the entire time. And I love that. It just made my night. John Brown's not coming back here. I couldn't see it. He doesn't want to be. There's no spot for him. Emmanuel Sanders took his spot. He's not a special teams guy. So even on that 53, you still would rather have a Kumro who John Brown's a better wide receiver than Jay Kumro, but Kumro is going to give you the special teams aspect of it, and McKenzie's going to give you special teams aspect of it. So I can't see him really coming back, and there's plenty of teams that need something. Trent Murphy's not coming back either, as much as part of me wants it. He's also
Can
not
I
coming
convince
back.
Jerry Jones to cut Ty and Secchi? I'd welcome him back.
The most likely situation, I think some of the other names you mentioned, Moreland,
Crosby and Moreland, I think there's actual logic of they're younger, they were injured, they didn't get claimed
at positions
waivers,
of need.
At positions of need.
Sure.
there's a reason you'd want him physically in town to check out beforehand. So
Totally.
Crosby and Moreland are the two that make the most sense to me.
Sure. I think there's a really good chance it's going to be some guy we don't even.
A guy we've literally never heard of.
We're going to be like, wait, looking it up. Who's this guy?
Go scramble and have to find the writer for that team to be like, hey, tell me something about this guy. Who is this guy?
Very typical Brandon Bean throwing us a curveball of some guy one of their scouts has, a pro scout had a hots for.
Definitely a good chance it's Cam Newton. I think that.
Yes, it's Cam Newton. Spread that. No. So I don't know who it's going to be, but I don't know that it'll be like a high impact guy. I hope it is. I hope it's a good vet that they can bring in and pad some of the depth at a cornerback or offensive line because I do think it's needed, but we'll see. I think we'll probably find out here in the next day or so. I don't know that they'll be able to keep it from the beat too long if he's flying into town.
At some point, I will say the agent for the other team has a vested interest in not spilling the beans if they know that it ticks off Sean McDermott and Brandon Bean.
Totally.
So they're going to want to keep it tight to the vest until they know about it. Once it gets close to that, you never know. You might hear
can you just keep your mouth into the mic directly, please? No.
Yeah. Try to speak directly into the microphone.
Yes, thank you.
But yeah, I'm curious to see what names we see. But again, our friends over at Uncle Jumbo is really excited. The Streets family have been awesome to us and have some exciting things coming later on this year. So opening up a tasting room downtown. We're going to maybe do some live shows from there. When that opens up, they're starting a bourbon. I'm super excited about that. I love bourbon. So all kinds of fun, exciting things. Make sure you're checking out. They're available all over the place. Make sure you go find some of their good stuff. I'm really excited about that. As the season comes along, we're also very excited to welcome back our friends over at West Her. So in our post-game shows, you're going to see our West Her drive of the game after each game going through our post-game shows.
Team West Her, hashtag it.
That's right. And honestly, if this interests you and you find that being able to speak to the audience that comes and listens to our show every single week, we have the fortune that Aaron and I haven't really figured it out, but each week tens of thousands of people come and listen to everything that we do on the various platforms. If you would like to have your brand come and shared amongst us, we have some openings on the preview show each week, getting ready to preview each game and be able to go through. So if you would like to reach out, please let us know. Reach out on the various platforms of social media. We'd be happy to send you over some of our information and put together a package for you. So
absolutely, yeah, it keeps the pod going. We appreciate all the sponsors because Greg has a full-time job. I got my hands full of kids. This is really you got a passion. Job. Yeah, it's a full-time job. It's a passion of ours, and there's a lot of behind-the-scenes cost that goes to keeping a whole network of content going. And so this really helps us to keep this content pumping out for you guys each and every week. And so super important, super thankful that people believe in our product enough to put their name associated to it. It's really cool. Come quite a far way.
No, it's something that we really appreciate. And again, as we're getting ready for the season, come give us a like, give us a rating, give us a review, tell a friend about the show. It really makes a difference. We did the contest for the tickets. We really appreciate that. Mm-hmm. But if you haven't had a chance to be able to give us a rating on iTunes or to be able to share the platform, we're now on Spotify, we're on iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, our YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed to it, just to get the alert to let you know about it, subscribe to it, hit the little bell button. It'll tell you when our show is coming on. All kinds of different things that can help us about it. And if you have an uncle who likes the Bills and wants to listen to a show, show them how to listen to it. Show them how to watch the show. Be able to help get more people to be able to experience what we do. We work hard for you guys. Really want to be able to share it with more people, and it means a lot when you guys refer us to others. It's really the best compliment you can give us. Yeah,
and really that goes for all the shows on the Cover One Network. If you are somebody that's just been listening to our show here for years and you haven't had a chance yet to check out all the other shows, we got a show every single night of the week. You got the Roundup show with Rob and Kyle. You got the Hoof podcast with Sterling, who we had on last week, Anthony Romeo and Eric. Those guys are doing a great job. Obviously, Disguised Coverage, a good friend of ours, Anthony Prahaushka. So we've got shows every single night of the week here. The fantasy show, huge fantasy week. If I was you, I'd go back and start grinding on some of the evergreen content from the fantasy show if you haven't drafted yet. So we've got you covered every single night of the week. If you haven't been able to check out those shows yet, I really highly recommend each and every one of them. They're all doing a great job right now.
Absolutely. We appreciate you guys so much. William, thank you very much, man. It's very generous
Thank
of
you,
you.
William.
We appreciate it. But we're going to be here for you all season long. Next week is our first preview show. Next Wednesday night, we are previewing a football game.
Steelers.
Because the Buffalo Bills will be hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers, our first preview show of the year. Cannot wait. Going to be really, really exciting. Between now and then, where can the good people find you, Aaron?
Yeah, you can find me at Aaron Quinn 716 and over in the Slack channel, ramping up for the season.
Let's go. For anyone who just wants to dip your toe in the water of the Cover One Premium Slack channel, it is worth it all by itself in your premium subscription. On game day, it is the place to be.
It's lit.
It is awesome on game day. So much fun.
I close Twitter and just stay in the Slack channel on game day.
Yeah, it is awesome. It's just a fantastic experience. But you can come find me at Greg Tompsett, messing around on Twitter in the Cover One Slack channel, meeting Cover One Slack channel members at the Bills Stadium. It's a good time. Really, really appreciate it. Jose, really appreciate you, man. It's awesome. You guys have been great tonight. The chat was fantastic tonight. We're going to be here for you all season long. But on behalf of Aaron Quinn, I am Greg Tompsett. You have been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.